Okay, welcome back. In this video, what we're going to do is go ahead and I'm going to introduce you to the viewports in 3D Studio Max, how they work, what they're for, and how to go ahead and work with them. Okay, so by default, you should see a screen something like this when you first open up 3D Studio Max 2009. What you'll see is 4 viewports. And the active viewport will have a yellow border around it. So right now I know that my active viewport is this viewport down here in the lower right quadrant, and it's called perspective, as we can see up here in name in the upper left of the viewport. Now we have a perspective viewport which closely matches what we see with our human eyes with 3D perspective. Then we have 3 other viewports. So we have one up here, and this is the front viewport. This is basically looking at our scene from the front or down the y-axis and allows us to see an orthographic view of the scene, so there is no 3D perspective going on here. Over here we have a top view, which is the same thing, only now we can view objects from the top or down the z-axis. And then we have a left view, which allows us to see objects from the x-axis or the left side of the scene. It's also orthographic. Let's go back to the perspective. Simply click on it, or middle mouse button click, or right button click, left mouse button click to go ahead and activate this. You can use either one of those mouse buttons to activate this viewport so that it's highlighted with this yellow border letting you know it's the currently active viewport. Okay, so what can we do with these viewports? Well, the viewports, we can do a lot of things with them. First, let's go ahead and resize the viewport. The viewport is broken up between different viewports with these lines, these border lines that you can see right here between the different viewports. Now your mouse cursor, when it's not over the lines, appears to be this white arrow cursor. Pretty standard, right? Well, when you put the mouse cursor over one of these borders, it'll change to a different cursor with 2 arrows, one pointing up and one pointing down, if you're on this border right here that separates the top from the bottom. If you're on a border that separates left from right, you'll see your mouse cursor switches, so now you get the same double arrow icon, only this time it's pointing left to right instead of up and down. If you place your mouse cursor over the center of all 4 viewports right here where all the borders meet up, you'll get the same type of icon, only this time there's 4 arrows going up, down, left, and right. What we can do is when our mouse cursor changes to one of those icons is we can left click and we can drag, and this allows us to resize the viewports however we'd like. So we can make the bottom viewports larger or make the top viewports larger, whatever we want or whatever we need in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. We can do the same by moving this border left and right, and we can grab the center here and we can move that around as well. So we can click and drag that anywhere we want freely, basically up, down, left, or right. If you'd like to reset the viewports back to the default size, simply right click on any one of these borders and you see a submenu pop out, and there's only one option, the reset layout option. Click on that and all 4 viewports will snap back to the default size, so now they're nice and even. Okay, we can also maximize a specific viewport to take up all of our viewport real estate space here. There's a couple of ways we can do that, the long way and the short way. I'll show you the long way first. The long way is by coming down here to this area on the lower right of the interface. These are the viewport controls, and we have several of these viewport controls. Now, down here to the right, you'll see one viewport control. And if you hover your mouse button over most items in the 3D Studio Max interface, you get a little tooltip that pops up. In this case, the tooltip's telling us that this button is the Maximize Viewport Toggle button. So let's go ahead and click on this button here in the lower right. Once we do that, you'll notice that we only have one viewport, the perspective viewport. Basically what happens is whatever viewport is active and highlighted in a yellow border is going to go ahead and get maximized and take up all the space. So 3ds Max gets rid of all the other viewports and maximizes this viewport or whatever active viewport you had at the time when you click that toggle button, and makes that the main viewport that takes up all the space. If we click on that button again, we go back to the 4 views. So basically the viewport, the perspective viewport in this case, gets restored. And then we can maximize it again, restore it again, do whatever it is that we want or need. Now the short way of doing that is by using the shortcut keys on the keyboard. 3D Studio Max takes advantage of a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Now it'll take you some time to get used to these keyboard shortcuts and learn most of them, if not all of them. However, it's extremely worth it, and it is worth your while to take some time and invest that time into learning keyboard shortcuts, as they can make your work a lot faster, more efficient, and make your life a lot easier. So the shortcut to toggle and maximize the viewport that you have active is Alt and W on the keyboard. If I hit that once, my viewports will get restored. If I do that again, my active viewport gets maximized. So Alt and W allows you to toggle between maximized and restored views. So that's how we can do that. So let's go ahead and let's maximize this perspective viewport simply by making sure that it's the active viewport highlighted in the yellow border. Hit Alt and W to maximize the viewport. And now what we're going to do is we're going to navigate in our viewport. As you can see right here, we have something called a grid. And if we move around here, we can see the grid is just kind of laying there. And you can see that it has these different lines and things. And the grid's just to facilitate you when working in 3ds Max. Okay, so how can we move our current perspective view around so we can see what's going on? Well, we can move using a few different tools. Down here in the viewport control tools in the lower right, we have several tools for moving around and doing all kinds of things. For example, this large magnifying glass icon, if we go ahead and click on that, you'll see our mouse cursor changes to, well, of course, a magnifying glass icon. So left click in the viewport and just drag your mouse forward and backwards. And what you can do is basically move the camera or dolly the camera forwards and backwards. Edit that out of the video. There was a door. Starting again in 3, 2, 1. So basically what you can do with this tool is dolly the camera back and forth. Just use the left mouse button, click, drag forwards and backwards with the mouse, and there you go. It's really that simple. We have a few other tools here, and we have another tool here called the orbit tool, and if we click on that and activate it, we'll get this yellow icon that pops up on the viewport, and our mouse cursor changes to show these kind of two orbiting arrows orbiting each other. And if we left click here and drag, we can orbit and basically rotate this perspective camera around so we can see this from different angles. We can also use these little icons here on the tops and on the sides of this yellow icon that popped up on our perspective view here to go ahead and rotate this and orbit this in different ways. There is a better way of working with the camera controls, and the best way to work with these viewport controls is by using the shortcut keys on the keyboard, because they're going to save you a lot of time. Going down to the viewport controls is not very practical, and you're going to find yourself spending a lot of time doing that, and that's probably one of the last things you want to do. So what you want to do is maximize your efficiency and time in 3ds Max by spending that time on your projects rather than spending it on clicking buttons on the interface. So here's the shortcut keys for navigating in the viewports. Hold down the Alt key and use the middle mouse button to rotate and orbit the camera basically. So instead of going down and using the orbiting camera tool, you can just use Alt and then use the middle mouse button to click and drag and orbit your perspective view around. If you hold down Alt, damn it, I messed up. We're going to start again in 3, 2, 1. Now if you just hold down the middle mouse button by itself without holding down the Alt key, you can pan the camera around. You notice the mouse cursor changes to a small little hand, and what you can do now is pan the camera around. So now the camera is going to move around and pan side to side or up and down. So let's let go of the middle mouse button. The next camera viewport control here that we can do is again using the middle mouse button. If you use the scroll wheel on your mouse, you can go ahead and scroll back and forth, which essentially does the same thing as if we were to click on this little zoom icon here of the magnifying glass and we left click and move our mouse forwards and backwards. It's the same thing as using the scroll wheel on your mouse. Now, if for some reason you don't have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can use the shortcut key Alt and Z on the keyboard to activate the zoom tool automatically. And then you can go ahead and move forwards and backwards with your camera, or dolly your camera forwards and backwards using the left mouse button. Okay, so that's going to cover it for the viewport controls and how to navigate in the cameras, which is one of the most essential things to be able to do in any 3D software, including 3ds Max. So we're going to end this video here, and in the next one we'll go ahead and pick up and continue running with 3ds Max.